What if I told you that the serpent in the Garden of Eden was not actually a snake? That everything you thought you knew about this story, let's go so far as to say this archetypically iconic tale of the Bible, was based on a misunderstanding? What if the serpent wasn't just some sort of tempter, but instead a much deeper figure connected to humanity's journey toward both knowledge and free will? Stick with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to learn is going to change how you understand not just the Genesis story, but the nature of good, evil, and knowledge itself. We are going to explore the original Hebrew, examine how ancient cultures viewed serpents, and even ask the question, was the serpent really Satan or something else entirely? The answers may send shockwaves down your spine. All right, let us begin this journey of ancient texts, symbolic meanings, and the unrevealed facts behind one of the most famous stories in the Bible. Number 1. The conventional serpent story. Before we dive deeper into the subject, let me give you a quick rundown of the basics. In the Bible, Adam and Eve were the first humans. They had been placed in the Garden of Eden. This was a utopian place, no sin, no misery. They had one simple rule: not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Then the serpent came and turned Eve's mind toward eating the fruit. Eve shared some with Adam, and at that moment, it all changed. They instantly both knew they were naked, were ashamed, and were, in fact, thrown out of the garden. This act of disobedience is traditionally known as an act that brought sin into the world. But wait a minute, is that all there is to it? Is this animal simply a snake, or is something more lurking beneath the surface? To find the answer, we have to go behind the English translation of the Bible and investigate the original Hebrew. Number 2, understanding the Hebrew word, Nahash. The word for serpent in the original Hebrew text of Genesis is Nahash. This word was translated in most modern Bibles as serpent or snake, but Hebrew is an involved language. Words may have multiple meanings based upon context, and Nahash certainly does. Although Nahash can signify serpent, it can also be applied to mean diviner or enchanter. It is therefore full of possibility that what spoke to Eve was not a snake, but something or somebody much more powerful. Maybe this figure was more than an animal, but a being with supernatural knowledge or even divine insight. Another, less frequent rendering of Nahash is one who practices divination. Divination, in the ancient world, was any attempt to glean knowledge from supernatural forces. It was considered a means of revealing hidden truths, often connected to the divine. If the Nahash of Genesis were to be understood within this context, it completely flips the whole narrative. What was once just a snake offering Eve a piece of fruit now becomes a being unveiling knowledge unto them. The thing is, it is not knowledge that should have been given. The knowledge of good and evil was not for humanity at that stage in life, hence the huge sanctions. Most ancient cultures had their diviners, who to a large extent were necessary to guide the people through spiritual or religious matters. They were understood to be the medium between the human world and the divine world. They had insight into things that were not known to man. Divination among Mesopotamians, Egyptians, and other Near Eastern peoples was greatly dreaded and equally respected. Within this context, therefore, the serpent in the Genesis story might have played a diviner-like role, a person or thing offering hidden knowledge not really to be given away freely. This gives a moral twist to the story. Was the serpent truly a villain, or was it just presenting an option for Eve to consider? Number 3, the serpent as deity or supernatural being. Now that we have established Nahash does not necessarily mean serpent, another embracing theory is one that says the serpent in Genesis could have been some sort of divine being, even a god. In ancient mythology, serpents were often associated with wisdom, immortality, and divine power. The roles of serpents ranged across different cultures, from Egyptians to Mesopotamians, far beyond those of mere animals. Serpents hold tremendous symbolic uses as vehicles of power and wisdom in various ancient mythologies. For example, Mesopotamian myth often employed a serpent to image the god Ninazu, a deity associated with life and death, including the underworld. In Egyptian mythology, the cobra stood for Wadjet, the goddess of protection and royal authority. But it is important to note that serpents did not at all times represent evil. On the contrary, most ancient cultures regarded them as wise since through their annual shedding of skin they appeared to renew their lives. This is to say that they were thought to hold the kind of knowledge that was life-giving yet dangerous. Could the serpent in Genesis have been similarly regarded, that is, as a knowledgeable character offering much more profound than the simple bite of fruit to Eve? In some of the ancient cultures, serpents were considered guardians of either sacred places or a treasure. For example, in Greek mythology, serpents guarded golden apples belonging to the Hesperides, a fruit of the gods, which had the ability to grant immortality to anyone who consumed them. Similarly, in Hindu mythology, serpentine beings known as Nagas are often entrusted to guard wisdom or divine treasures. What if the serpent in Genesis is playing this sort of role? Rather than merely having tempted Eve, perhaps the serpent was guarding the knowledge of good and evil until it was time to present it. It makes for a more nuanced story. The serpent wasn't merely a trickster, but a figure holding profound knowledge that would change humanity forever. Was this some kind of divine plan all along in which the serpent was involved? Was this some sort of catalyst to cause and affect the evolution of man into a knowing state in terms of morality? Number 4. The serpent as a fallen angel. Was it Satan? It is one of the most judiciously held beliefs in Christian theology that the serpent in Genesis was Satan in disguise. What that means to say is that it wasn't just a creature. It was some sort of fallen angel, Satan himself, working to undermine God's plan for humanity. But does this theory hold up when we look closely at the text? Above all, in the Christian tradition, Satan is strongly associated with the serpent in Genesis. This is based on texts such as Revelation 12:9, which refers to that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. According to this perspective, what happened in the Garden of Eden was part of a larger spiritual rebellion, a cosmic struggle between good and evil. In most cases, Satan is regarded as the embodiment of evil, being depicted as a fallen angel who at every turn desires to divert people away from God. If Satan was indeed the serpent in Genesis, then his actions were orchestrated so that the relationship between God and humanity was severed right from its outset. But why did Satan take the form of a serpent, and why tempt Eve? The whole interpretation of the Genesis story changes if the serpent was indeed Satan in disguise. The temptation of Eve wasn't about disobedience, but of a greater spiritual conflict. It was Satan, through the entity of the serpent, that wished to corrupt humanity and separate them from God's divine plan. This fits into the broader Christian narrative of redemption and salvation. The fall of Adam and Eve set the stage for the eventual need for a Savior, Jesus Christ, to reconcile humanity with God. But it does bring in questions of free will. If Satan was actively working to lead humanity astray, did Adam and Eve have a choice? Or were they always destined to fall? The theme of fallen angels is recurrent throughout the Bible. Other instances were noted, outside of Satan's rebellion, where angels rebelled against the will of God and subsequently fell from heaven. One of the most recognized stories refers back to Genesis 6, in which the sons of God, usually portrayed as fallen angels, took human wives for themselves, creating a movement that plunged Earth into chaos. Punishment awaited these angels, but the damages brought about by them had already been perpetuated among humans. If the serpent in Genesis was a fallen angel, then it fits within a broader biblical theme of rebellion. Angels that rebelled against God often brought severe consequences upon humanity. The temptation of Eve by the serpent may have been part of a larger cosmic rebellion, one that reached through and affected human history. Number 5. The serpent as a symbol of chaos and primordial disorder. Now, let's consider the serpent as a chaos symbol, which is traceable in many ancient myths of creation. Throughout many cultures, serpents were identified with chaos, disorder, or primordial forces threatening stability in the world. Might it be that this serpent in Genesis does indeed represent these forces? Possibly this was not only an agent of temptation, but actually a representative of disorder in a perfectly ordered world. In Babylonian mythology, Tiamat was a serpent-like chaos monster said to be representative of the untamed forces of nature. She was the personification of the primordial ocean and had to be defeated by the god Marduk before the world could be created. Tiamat wasn't just an enemy to the gods. She symbolized those chaotic, destructive forces that at all times threatened order. The serpent in Genesis could also do the same thing. In Genesis, the Garden of Eden is this perfect place. Adam and Eve are at one with nature and with God. The coming of the serpent brought disorder to this preordained divine order. The serpent tempted Eve to break the order that had kept a world without chaos. In Norse mythology, the Midgard serpent plays an important role in the prophecy related to the end of the world. Jörmungandr is a sea serpent giant curled around the earth, and during the time of Ragnarok, he would emerge from the sea and wreak havoc. In the event of the release of the serpent, the return of chaos would manifest itself against the rule that sustains the world. When we apply this symbolism to the Genesis story, the role of the serpent is above that of a tempter. More rightly, it is a force of chaos against an age-old harmony existing in the Garden of Eden. By eating the fruit, Adam and Eve also did not just disobey but let loose the forces of chaos upon the world, for which they were cast out of paradise. One of the thematic elements present in most creation myths is the battle between chaos and order. Indeed, in many such stories, the defeat of chaotic forces represents the gods' attempt at the world's creation. Chaos is never overcome, but always remains in the background to return at any moment. In Genesis, the serpent perhaps represents that very real and constant menace of chaos. Even with the world issued forth from God, there was bound to be an inherent possibility of disorder within. The serpent's temptation of Eve was that moment when chaos re-entered the world, shattering the divine order and leading to the fall of humanity from grace. Number 6. The serpent as representation of human desire and curiosity. But what if, for example, the serpent weren't a being at all? What if that serpent represented something within us? Other scholars say the serpent epitomizes human desire, or an inner struggle of following rules versus the forbidden knowledge of life. That turns the concept of the serpent from an external tempter to an internal struggle that is common with all humans. Much of the framing surrounding the story of Adam and Eve is one of disobedience, but it's also a story about the pursuit of knowledge. The tree of knowledge of good and evil represented something which humans weren't meant to have, at least not at that time. But the serpent encouraged Eve to reach for that knowledge, to take what was forbidden. In this reading, the serpent is not the bad guy. It's the human urge to know the world, whatever the cost. Eve's decision to eat the fruit had not been an act of rebellion, but one toward self-awareness, a leap into the unknown. Knowledge essentially is built in the structure of being human. Human beings have always pushed the limits since times unknown, wanting to know more than what was actually given. However, most of these times, a price needs to be paid for that knowledge. Adam and Eve were destined to lose innocence because of this knowledge. Curiosity cuts both ways. On one hand, it incites the investigation of innovation and exploration that propels human progress forward. It may also achieve an end opposite from what was intended. In the story of Adam and Eve, curiosity regarding the fruit banished them from Eden. They gained knowledge but lost their paradise. That curiosity should be at once a blessing and a curse is a theme which plays itself out across the breadth of human history. From the story of Prometheus to the never-ending scientific progress, which gave as much cause for alarm as it did cause for rejoicing. Knowledge-seeking often walks hand in glove with pitfalls. It is this struggle that the serpent in Genesis can be said to represent. It presents Eve with an opportunity for expanded knowledge, a chance to understand the difference between good and evil. But that knowledge is quite expensive, as innocence is lost, and suffering is introduced into the world. Number 7. The serpent as a catalyst for human evolution. By considering the serpent to be much more than a clear-cut villain, one is faced with the strong possibility that this creature was not all evil. What if the serpent had been a necessary part of the growth of humanity? What if Adam and Eve did not simply fall, but progressed to the next step in human evolution? Section: Transition from innocence to knowledge. The innocence that Adam and Eve were meant to experience before the fruit was enjoyed did not let them know good from evil, right from wrong. Hence, they lived in harmony, but without the ability to make moral decisions. A choice then. The serpent's temptation gave them a choice: stay in their innocent state or take another step toward self-awareness. They moved from innocence to knowledge by eating the fruit. The actions of Adam and Eve were now conscious. Finally, they could comprehend morality and be bestowed with free will. This was the stage that had to be evolved for the two humans. The serpent, therefore, was not a deceiver but a catalyst for this transformation. One of the central ideas in this Genesis story is free will. Adam and Eve did not have to eat the fruit, they chose to. And with that choice came consequences. And free will hangs square in the middle of the human experience. We all make choices that determine how our lives unfold, each with an associated set of positive and negative ramifications. In this story, the serpent is a sense of choice. Giving Eve the fruit created a choice for her. This act of choice is what distinguished them from the rest of creation. That's what gives them the ability to love and show compassion and grow, but also to sin, hate, and destroy. It is in this reading that the serpent ceases to be just a tempter and becomes one who offers humanity free will to choose and, by doing so, to grow into complete consciousness. The Genesis story is also understood more allegorically by many scholars and theologians in terms of the evolution of human consciousness. For in fact, the ingestion of fruit presents an awakening of consciousness whereby Adam and Eve became aware of their own existence in a moral sense. That is, they knew themselves capable of self-reflection, of comprehending the consequences of their actions. It is there in the serpent's temptation and their subsequent act of eating the fruit that signifies the transition whereby humanity acquired the capacity to reflect on its actions. This was, in short, the birth of human consciousness. The serpent, then, wasn't just a trickster, it was a figure guiding them towards self-awareness, even though at great cost. This reading finds a place within the greater human narrative. History has often revealed that great leaps in man's understanding have come at the cost of comfort or innocence. The serpent in Genesis would thus represent the very initiation of man into this journey, the first step along the long path of wisdom and self-realization that would be the history of humanity. Number 8. The serpent and the duality of good and evil. Duality is probably one of the most overwhelming themes within the story of the serpent, a balance of good and evil, order and chaos, knowledge and ignorance. The serpent personifies this duality, symbolizing at the same time wisdom and danger, temptation and enlightenment. The serpent, as an image that combined both good and evil, is a common feature in many ancient cultures. Whereas conventionally serpents have been regarded as wise and immortal, in many other traditions, their association with death and chaos has become despicable. This is ambiguously echoed in the function of the serpent in Genesis. While the serpent gives Eve knowledge, which is generally considered a positive thing, that knowledge comes with its consequences. The serpent's actions are one of enlightenment and suffering, wisdom and loss. As in most creation myths, the concept of duality is central to the story, and the serpent is no different in that his temptation was not purely evil, but part of a higher, greater cosmic balance, a necessary step forward in humanity's journey of self-awareness. In this Genesis account, there is a continued struggle between order and chaos. The Garden of Eden was a perfect order, a place where everything was in harmony with each other. Then the serpent came, introducing chaos into this ordered world. By tempting Eve, he offset the balance and brought disorder within the garden. This tension of order versus chaos is a common theme in creation myths. In the Babylonian creation story, for instance, it required the god Marduk defeating the monster of chaos, Tiamat, before he could create the world. The gods of Norse mythology are in a constant struggle to maintain order against the threat of Ragnarok, or the return of chaos. It is in Genesis that the function of the serpent is that of challenging the established order. While its temptation of Eve brings about the fall, at the very same time, it sets up the basis upon which humanity would grow and develop. Chaos needed to enter the world for the betterment of man, who would acquire knowledge and free will, although with rather negative consequences. Central as it might be to the story of Genesis, what does the tree of knowledge of good and evil really represent? The knowledge that they will have after having eaten the fruit is not essentially the moral perception of wrong and right, but deeper awareness of the complexities of life. By eating the fruit, Adam and Eve learned of their own deaths, their own free wills, and the consequences of that free will. The knowledge was enlightening to them, but brought much suffering. They were now capable of love, compassion, and creativity, but also of pain, loss, and death. This was furthered in the way in which the serpent presented this knowledge, showing the duality of good and bad. Knowledge in and of itself is neither good nor bad. It is what one does with it. Indeed, the temptation of the serpent brought about knowledge, but also the responsibility that comes along with it. The eating of fruit by Adam and Eve was a turning point because for the first time, man had acquired the power to determine their destiny either for good or ill, or number 9, serpent as a symbol of rebellion. The serpent in Genesis might be said in many ways to represent rebellion, even more so than the prohibition by God, but rather against the status quo. What the serpent does represents a challenge to the status quo. It is an offer to mankind to break out of the chains of innocence and into a real world of knowledge and moral complexity. While the tempting of Eve by the serpent has often been regarded by scholars as an act that brought about man's fall, it can just as well be regarded as a rebellious moment. The established divine order in the Garden of Eden was being challenged by the serpent when he tempted Eve to eat the fruit. In that sense, what the serpent did was not so much an effort at getting man to sin as it was a question of opening other avenues for man, through insight, choice, free will. This rebellious deed set the scene for growth in man, but at the same time, there was a penalty for such a rebellious act. The fall of humanity was not solely a punishment, but rather an integral, even necessary, step in the development of mankind. In this tale, the serpent functions as a symbol of choice and rebellion, as potent forces in the determination of human destiny. The theme of rebellion pervades many mythological traditions. In Greek mythology, Prometheus defied the gods by stealing fire and giving it to humanity, thus bringing enlightenment and suffering to humanity. In Norse mythology, Loki constantly challenges the gods, often causing chaos yet often bringing about necessary change. In these stories, rebellion is imagined as both dangerous and necessary. It upsets the stability of the status quo, but it moves humankind forward. The rebellion of the serpent in Genesis might be seen in similar ways. Its actions brought disorder into the world, yet they also provided the conditions whereby humanity would develop and progress. Number 10. The serpent and the problem of free will. One of the biggest themes brought about in Genesis is that of free will. Adam and Eve's decision to eat the fruit was their free-willed decision, a choice to which there came both knowledge and consequences. Yet was this choice truly theirs, or was it birthed by the serpent's temptation? The story of Adam and Eve is related by some to accountability with free will. God gave the free will to Adam and Eve to choose whether to eat the fruit or not. Free will brought responsibility. The serpent was tempting them with a choice between an innocent world or one with hidden knowledge and moral complexity. The eating of the fruit by man and his wife was a use of free will. The result was that man started on his road to self-awareness and moral responsibility. The role played by the serpent shows how free will imposes an important role in human destiny. While the serpent often possesses the role of the bad actor within the Genesis story, it is also a kind of agent for moral development. Before they ate the fruit, Adam and Eve were naive in that they had no concept of right or wrong. The serpent tempted them in a manner that would, in fact, allow them to discern right from wrong and become morally conscious. This moral maturation came with its curse, yet was part of necessary human development. The role of the serpent in this story shows that choice is very vital in the development of human character. Human moral maturation can never occur without choices, since without it there can't be any moral maturation or understanding of right and wrong. The story of Adam and Eve is, in the last analysis, that of balance between freedom and responsibility. This is a very heavy responsibility, the right to choose, given to Adam and Eve by the serpent's temptation, likewise gave them the responsibility of a life filled with consequences. This is the balance between freedom and responsibility that has always dogged human history. The choices we make shape our lives, yet they have consequences. The role of the serpent offering Eve the fruit was to bring about this fragile balance of how, with knowledge and freedom, comes the responsibility to use them well. Number 11. The serpent in modern interpretations. The story of the serpent has found its interpretation through many ages and continues to inspire modern interpretations. The role of the serpent in the story of Adam and Eve has been revisited innumerable times, from literature to philosophical debates. The serpent has been used as a symbol of temptation, knowledge, and rebellion throughout the ages in works of literature. Probably one of the most famous examples is that of Satan himself in John Milton's Paradise Lost, where he appears to Eve as a serpent, tempting her into rebellion against God. In this epic poem, what the serpent does is part of a greater cosmic struggle of good versus evil that has far-reaching implications for humanity. The role of the serpent has been discussed in many other works of literature. In some tales, the serpent takes on the form of a kingly character of wisdom and enlightenment to offer the character an opportunity for knowledge and growth. In others, the serpent is shown as a character of chaos, disrupting order setup and bringing about necessary change. The meaning of the serpent in Genesis has also weighed heavily in the minds of philosophers for its implications regarding human nature, morality, and free will. According to some thinkers, the serpent is the personification of human curiosity, an explanation of man's drive to understand the world, even when that understanding comes at a cost. Other people view the serpent as a sign of the duality of good and evil that, in some way, underlines the problematics of human choice. The role of the serpent in offering Eve the fruit opens up great questions concerning the nature of temptation, the consequences of knowledge, and the tension between freedom and responsibility. The serpent is a common motif in art and culture, often symbolizing messages on temptation, knowledge, and transformation. In Christian art, the serpent is continuously portrayed as this evil creature that misleads humankind. However, in other traditions, serpents are the symbols for wisdom, rebirth, and eternal life. The serpent is a symbol that even in modern times carries immense power. This creature manages to make appearances in movies, books, and even music. In fact, its role in Genesis has transformed many interpretations of that one-time story into new perspectives on the nature of temptation, knowledge, and the human experience. From what we've established, it is clear that the serpent in Genesis wasn't any snake. Be it a god, fallen angel, a symbol of chaos, or even a metaphor for human desire, this serpent played so much deeper roles within the story than what we were led to believe. Not all had to do with temptation, but with knowledge, choice, and the consequences of growth. And the next time you read the story of Adam and Eve, remember this: the serpent wasn't just a trickster, it was part of a much larger cosmic plan to challenge humankind in order to choose, grow, and take responsibility for those choices. The image of the serpent is not as one-dimensional as we had thought, and through its actions, humanity was on its way to a knowledge and self-awareness that, if this was an enlightening exploration, wait until you see our next video. Is salt a spiritual weapon? It goes deep into the mysterious spiritual meaning of salt and its surprising power throughout history. Make sure to click and watch that next. Before you go, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share with others who would enjoy these hidden biblical insights. By showing support, we are able to keep bringing these fascinating discussions into light. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next video.